probably the most important thing in your book, and this is something that we look at first. So if you want to make notes, number one is your characters. Your main character has to be very compelling, and we have to kind of fall in love with that character. So what I want, and what I think 9 out of 10 readers out there want, is to embrace your character, to fall in love with your character, to feel empathy for your characters. The characters make the conflict, right? That people say, well, I'm plotting my story. And I'm like, well, if you have strong characters, you don't need to plot your story. The characters should be put in a position by virtue of the world that you've created and the goal that you've given your characters, that there's conflicts. So by them just being who they are, they're going to face untenable situations. They're going to face life or death situations. They're going to face like an existential crisis. So the characters are what drives the story and how they interact. Not you saying, I'm going to plot this story so that nobody loses interest, because it's going to look like mechanical. It's a great example of this as you look at what happens on Game of Thrones. So in Game of Thrones, every character has their own ambition. And because so many of them are the same ambition, which is to be king, then George R.R. Martin sits back and he watches something logical happen, because some of these are good guys and they're going to play fair and square all the way through, and some are bad guys, and the bad guys are going to have scenes where they just try to kill everybody and kind of lie to them and cheat and whatever. So you see their values unfold, and you learn about the characters by how they try to achieve their goals. Characters are the most important thing, and characters make the story. This is something I cannot iterate enough, that without a strong bunch of characters together, there is no story. You can't plot a book by saying, I'm going to write a plot for these characters. The characters have to agree with you. Otherwise, they're going to rebel, you know? A character arc is how the character changes from the very first page to the last page. A character arc is when you look at the character's values and how they change over time. So you can sometimes say that, you know, a character is going to think the world works like this. They are then going to meet somebody else. There's going to be a conflict, and then they're going to learn something. I want to know that the character has changed, that I feel satisfied. So the best example of this is A Christmas Carol. You see this guy, he's miserable. He gets a warning from his old business partner, like, don't live like this, dude. It's not good. He then, the guy does him a huge favor, says, you're going to be visited by 3 spirits overnight. If you remember Scrooge at the end of that story compared to the beginning, he's now a completely different person. So Dickens was such a great storyteller that he did this all in a very short book because of his interactions with these 3 different people, these spirits, he calls them. And now you have a character change. And what is more satisfying at the end? Why is this story, you know, why is it the only movie on around Christmas every year? There's like 8 different versions of it. Because we love to see this character change. I'll tell you what doesn't work. What doesn't work is when you love a character, you read this story, and the character doesn't change at all. That all this stuff happens to them, and they're exactly the same. Are we feeling something for the main character? So the thing there is, you know, people that are good at writing villains will make you come to understand the villains often. So it's not just the main character that you need to understand. It helps so much when you understand all the characters. George Lucas tried to do this with the story of how Darth Vader became Darth Vader. He wasn't always Darth Vader, but in fact, he had all this potential, you know, and we actually love that story. It's the kind of thing that if you read the Bible, like, you know, Satan or Lucifer is supposed to be the brightest angel, but then he's like, I don't like the way this is working. I want to have my own little fiefdom down here. Your character doesn't have to be likable. Your character could be like an anti-hero or a character, but the point of view has to be interesting. There are lots of examples of genre stories where you might have, it's almost like the bad guy telling the story, but there's such an interesting character that you let them get away with it.